Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of this wonderful evening. Such an impressive, illustrious panel. Thank you so much for having me participate and open the whole event. I have been volunteering for a program called We Are Not Numbers. It's a program from Gaza, and I serve as a mentor for writers who are young and usually university age, like you, like many of you here. And I have become close to one of the young writers, and he and I have been in touch, and he lives in northern Gaza, in Gaza City. And Ahmed sent me voice messages telling me what's going on now. His family members are near Shifa Hospital, and he just went over there, and their whole house was bombed, and he had to help bring out some corpses from the rubble. So I like to bring Ahmed with me everywhere I go when I read poetry. He wrote a poem that I him with, and I'd like to read it. It's very short. It's called Nothing. Nothing. I'm still breathing, but that is not enough to feel alive. I lost my loved ones. I lost my power, hope, dreams, and my last tears. Nothing can express the pain of losing the people who were a major part of my life. Nothing can erase the last look at them from my eyes. Nothing can stop replaying our memories before Israel took them away. And nothing can let me imagine moving forward with my life after them. It's by Ahmed from Gaza. The next poem I read is one of my own, and perhaps some of you have heard it. It's called My Name, and it was inspired by the fact servants in Gaza have resorted to writing their names on their legs and arms in case they are in, a building falls on them, and so that they're able to identify if they're killed. Write my name. Write my name on my mama. Use the black permanent marker with the ink that doesn't bleed if it gets wet, the one that doesn't melt if it's exposed to heat. Write my name on my leg, mama. Make the lines thick and clear, and add your special flourishes so I can take comfort in seeing my mama's handwriting when to sleep. Write my name on my leg, mama, and on the legs of my sisters and brothers. This way we will belong together. This way we will be known as your children. Write my name on my leg, mama, and please write your name and Baba's name on your legs too, so we will be remembered as a family. Write my name on my leg, mama. Don't add any numbers, like when I was born or the address of our home. I don't want the world to see me as a number. I have a name, and I'm not a number. Write my name on my leg, mama. When the bomb hits our house, when the walls crush our skulls and bones, legs will tell our story, how there was nowhere to run. The last poem I will read to you. The last poem I'll read to you is Khair. Khair is the Arabic word for goodness. And it's amazing how many times of the day we use the word khair in Arab culture across the entire Arab world. So I wanted to finish with this poem. From the time farmers rise with the sun until night descends, there's talk of it. Songs and Quranic verses about khair, morning of khair, evening of khair. There's no ground goodness. تصبحي على خير, my mother would wish as she kissed my forehead at time. May you wake up to goodness. Later, I learned to respond, وإنتي من أهله. May you be part of its family, the family of khair. Even watching TV, we waited for bad news from Gaza. She would admonish, khair inshallah, goodness, God willing. No matter the misfortune, she was sure Allah would eventually bring it to Palestine. Maybe it all started with her neighbor, Jaffa, the family whose name was Khair Allah, God's goodness. From kindness to comity, their ancestors so much in this name. It was a hedge against hardship, an incantation in their bones, Palestine's bones, where khair resides from morning till night, in mother's kiss at bedtime, deep in a father's land. There, the roots of khair multiply in the earth, goodness bristling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zeina. Thank you. So we'll go to South Africa. Thank you, Dr. Memetlwe Sebei, for staying late, and we're looking forward to hear you. You have about 10 minutes to share with us your reflection on those portion that we shared with you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Abu-Nimer and the colleagues at School of International Services, as well as all the colleagues that have taken time to attend this gathering. And I'm really privileged, and I think, to be in company, you know, of the people that, like all of us, are moved by the carnage, by the bloodshed, you know, on a scale we haven't seen in recent time in Gaza at the moment, where, as we are speaking, 33,000 people, you know, or more than 33,000 people have lost life since October 7. And of course, this includes about 7,141 that have lost lives since International Criminal or International Court of Justice has granted an order, you know, of plausible or against plausible genocide, as they have in a case brought by South Africa. And I think that's important to make as I'll develop that point, you know, later on. I mean, it's not just the people who have lost lives. The level of devastation is just at under level. 2 million people have been displaced, and you know, 75,000 people have injured. The level of destruction of infrastructure, about 75% of the residential building is also schools, is hospitals, and is every infrastructure that make life imaginable in Gaza that has been destroyed. And I think this is the basis on which South African state, for instance, has made a case to say that there is a plausible case of genocide for which the International Court of Justice, but also all of us should be able to rally against in the case of what is actually happening there. And I'm just making those points because I think from South African case, that is what has been making an international headline. But I'm actually very critical of South African state, and I'll develop that point in a matter of minutes. I think the point here is that there are two levels at which I want to, or rather, the way I want to go about this is to, you know, reflect on two main streams or theaters of our work as a union in terms of solidarity. That is the work that we have done on the industrial plane, but also the work that we have done in a broader, you know, solidarity movement, as well as to make assessments of the successes and the failures in these movements, and of course, to conclude with the lessons, and I think the task. The fact of the matter is that we have seen in the past, few months in particular, unprecedented level of mobilizations against, as I've said, the carnage, the bloodshed, but also continuing and building on, the solidarity against the 16 years, old siege of Gaza, because we refuse to believe, to agree that everything just started here on the 7th of October. We also have been demonstrating against the brutal military occupation of West Bank, where the number of people dying and being brutalized are also rising. The whole apartheid regime inside, Israel, and of course the whole policy of settler colonialism and Israeli imperialism in Palestine in general. And I think this has been true of South Africa. This has been true of many countries across the world and so on. Insofar as ourselves as a trade union movement and general industries workers in South Africa, and even before the 7th of October, we had, mobilizations at industrial level. In 20, and I think this began when one of our, we have always been part of, or considered ourselves part of the broad solidarity, Palestinian solidarity movement. And I think one of the issues that we've been raising was, how then do we link with workers at workplace? And I think the opportunity for us presented itself when one of the companies that we organized, the biggest dairy manufacturer in the country, Clover, was taken by an Israeli company, Melco, that has operation in illegal Jewish settlements on the Palestinian land. And we then, launched, an all-out, attack against that and to demand divestment. And that meant taking the matter to court, in the Competition Commission and other regulatory bodies that look at corporate takeovers like this, where we raise the issue of Palestine and, of course, violations of the international law by virtue of operations of this company in those illegal Jewish settlements on Palestinian land. We also, linked it with ongoing struggles of the workers around restructuring plans that then followed. And what then followed was an epic battle, late 2021, November until May, 6 months unrelenting strike of workers that I must say, what is all the more remarkable in their tenacity is, these are workers that were faced with about 62% cuts in their wages, and all these horrific working conditions that just rolled, all the achievements in the post-apartheid period here, but also they are already poor that they could take such a prolonged strike was remarkable. And all the more because one of the issues that was central to that dispute was divestment in solidarity with Palestine, which the company demanded we take it off the table in order that we allow negotiations on those particular issues. And we absolutely refuse. And part of that was that, the workers, once they began to understand how their own brutalization, the intensification of their own exploitation was linked with model of colonial slavery that this company actually was importing from Palestine. They saw in their own struggle, in their own plight, the plight and the oppression, and of course, the brutalization that was going on in Palestine. And that's the reason that they absolutely refused to take the issue off the table. It was no longer just the union leadership issue, which we have always raised, especially ourselves as national office, but then it became the worker issues and so on. And in this 6-month strike, workers participated in a number of demonstrations that targeted, Israeli embassy, Israeli trade offices, and every target whenever the, Melco shareholders were visiting the company, all of that. And I think also, the US consulate and governments that we held responsible for their collaboration in the oppression and of course, occupation of the Palestinian lands and Palestinian people. And I think that for me was very instructive in terms of what it demonstrated was possible once workers and, of course, ordinary people understand the linkages between their own experiences of their own oppression, of their own conditions, and conditions of other working class and oppressed people thousands of miles away. And of course, obviously, the legacy of apartheid also helped, because this is within the living memory of many Black in this country, and who see in what is happening in Israel their own experience of brutal repression, of discrimination, and all those things and so on. And what was very instructive about this is that, it's a way that we managed to link this movement, which until now was on the margins, if you like, of the political spectrum. And of course, we managed to make it, we forced it on the mainstream in many ways, because in the 6 months, the strike was on the, was the headlines in the news. I for the most part, I was the one doing most of the media interviews, and we were doing something like 5, 6, TV interviews on a daily basis. And one of the dominant issues, the dominant issue there was also the issue of Palestine. And I think this took the issue to the mainstream of the labor movement. And I think on that basis, we managed to forge a real solidarity. And I think of importance was also the way in which the Palestinian solidarity movement itself, as it was before the strike, took an active interest in the struggles of these workers, both at a preparatory stage, but also in terms of supporting the pickets, the demonstration, as well as mobilizing active solidarity with the workers, food and other forms of support during the prolonged strike, when the workers were not paid, in a condition that they were already living in complete devastation and so on. Now, the other area in which, of course, we then participated was obviously raising the issue with our federation, SAFTU, as well as participating in a broader Palestinian solidarity movement that, again, surged in the aftermath of the October 7 and the beginning of the genocidal campaign that Israel regime has been waging and so on. The breadth, taking scale of this mobilization is just nothing we've seen, by way of solidarity movement in a post-apartheid period in this country. Tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people have been in demonstrations, in pickets, ranging from, pickets of few small people to demonstrations of thousands. And in some case, in the case of Cape Town, at some point, there was demonstration of 200,000, according to some estimates, in sometime in November last year and so on. And I think those mobilizations are continuing and so on. And I think they have forced the issue on the mainstream in that sense that, this is an issue that is being debated, not just only by people mainly pro-Zionist interest, talking about what's happening there, and the media that has not always been very, cooperative and supportive on this. But we have forced the issue that there has been now a widespread, discussions in society, in the public discourse, and I think that's one of the achievements that has been made in the course of these mobilizations. And I think that is absolutely important, even in terms of how we move forward, but also in terms of what has been achieved, which I want to touch on. Now, we have not always been able to win in terms of the immediate, demands against the immediate targets of our campaigns. And I think that's important to underline, because people think that success always lies on that. You are trying to force this company that has, linked to Zionist interest, and if they're not complying, at least immediately, that means you are failing and so on. For us, raising the level of consciousness in society, but also through that hot breath of working class discontent and public opinion on the issue, being able to shift the government policy on the issue on itself has been a tremendous success. Many people, I think internationally, take it for granted that the ANC, which came to power against the struggle, against apartheid, becomes a natural ally of the struggle of the Palestinian people. But what they're missing is that it is a party, and I think it's important that we underline that fact. This is a party that has betrayed the aspirations of the Black working class in this country, that has drowned in blood the struggles of the Black mine workers in mine belts of Rustenburg, where they killed mine workers demanding decent wages against the multinational corporations that are part of the Western imperial hegemony that monopolize key sectors of the economy and very powerful in those interests, other Zionist interests in the economy. And to expect that a government that pursues a policy that has betrayed the Black working class in this country will stand in consistent solidarity with the people of Palestine is to miss a point. Because in the final analysis, as we always underline, the policy, the foreign policy of any government is but an application on the international plane of the domestic policy of that government. And the ANC that you see today, that is taking Israel to International Court of Justice, is the ANC that is reacting to the pressure and the breathtaking scale of mass mobilization, relentless actions, pickets, and all of that has taken place and been built by the movement in the past few months. And is that pressure which has forced it to take the actions, while at the same time not taking decisive actions of imposing comprehensive boycotts, sanctions, and divestments. And I think that is part of the problem. And I want to conclude on the note that what we can only say is that it's on the basis of the organization, the unity, and the struggles of the working class that we can maintain a consistent, principled, internationalist support and solidarity with the people of Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the two powerful examples of the BDS. That's a concrete example, as well as the mobilization to support the ANC case, anti-genocide. That's very important as you describe the mobilization. I am sure we'll get back to you with some questions if you wait with us. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I wanna move on with the Medea Benjamin, who's the co-founder of the women peace group called PINK. She's also co-founder of the human rights group Global Exchange, the Peace in Ukraine Coalition, Unfreeze Afghanistan, which advocates for the returning of 7 billion of Afghan funds frozen in the US Bank. Also, the Alliance for Cuban Engagement and Respect, Nobel Prize for Cuban Doctor Campaign. So you could see lots of experience here.
Well, it's great to be at this university, but sad that it's on a day that the Students for Justice in Palestine is suspended. So I just want to express solidarity. Probation, but I want to express my solidarity with the students. And also say that it is the job of students at universities to protest things inside. I mean, come on. If you weren't protesting, then something is wrong. And this university really should be vested from Israel. It should be allowed to have protests within the buildings. So all of the work that you all are here to make this university accountable, I really applaud you for that. I was asked a couple of questions. One is how I got involved in this work, and I want to give two examples. One is the hatred I gained for war, killing people. And that was when I was in high school and there was a war raging in Vietnam, and my sister's boy was sent off during a draft thousands of miles away to go kill people he didn't even know who they were. And after 6 months, sent her home an ear of a Viet Cong as a souvenir to wear around her neck. And I thought, how sick. A nice boy taken from his home somewhere else to kill people for a reason he had no idea why, suddenly became a monster. And I realized at the moment that I hated war and got involved in my. Well, also when I was in school, I was growing up in a Long Island, New York neighborhood in a Jewish family that was very, very pro-Israel. And they had to indoctrinate their daughter in these Israel stuff. Let's send her to live on a kibbutz. And so they sent me to live on a kibbutz. And I actually the kibbutz life, because it was really kind of socialist in those days. And we'd go out in the morning and feel it was, like a collective spirit, except they told me, don't go talk to those Arabs over there. They're dirty, they're mean, they hate Jews, don't talk to them. Well, I was already a rebel, so of course I was going to go talk to those Arabs. And I went and I met with the Arabs, and I realized that one, they had much better food than they had on the kibbutz. And two, they were super wonderful people. And they taught me so much about what had happened, how they had been dispossessed of their land. And it really, it took me up. And so I decided I had to learn more. And I went to the West Bank, I went to East Jerusalem, just learned the horrific history of the Arab people and how everything I'd been told was a lie. And so from then on, I have been in support of the Palestinian struggle. Going to Gaza many times. I've been to Gaza about 7 times when we were able to go through Egypt, and saw horrific things that I never thought I would see. Well, what is happening now is something beyond what I could have ever imagined. And so the tactic that I have been focusing on is one of many, many beautiful tactics that are happening around this country and the most amazing grassroots mobilization that I have seen. And that is in Congress. And it's really interesting because one of your professors here, Louise, the time I ever went to Congress was with her when it was almost there was about the Iraq war, and we went in there to try to say, stop this. This is not the right way to respond to the 9/11 attacks. And we were online trying to get into a hearing. Lo and behold, they said, go in, ladies, and right behind the generals. And there we were, right behind General Rumsfeld and Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State. And we pulled out our banners and we started yelling about no attack, don't invade Iraq, got pulled out. I thought, wow, that banner behind the generals was broadcast all over the world. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. That's a great thing to do. And so it has been a tactic that many of us have used over the years. And when it came to this issue, I realized that it was important to go back into Congress, because Congress, whether we like it or not, is the ones that decide whether we're going to be sending billions and billions of dollars to Israel. And so I wanted to bring up another example for Iraq, which is Leslie Angeline, who is here, who, when our government was threatening to go to war with Iran, she did a 34-day, 24 hunger strike in the office of the most pro-Israel war hawk in Congress at that time, who was Senator Joe Lieberman, every day in his office demanding that he meet with a group of Iranians who didn't want to go to war. And after she fainted in his office, he agreed to meet. And had a beautiful meeting where they broke bread together. And I realized, that is a very powerful thing to do. And before I forget, I want to acknowledge somebody else who is on a hunger strike right now. And that is Larry Haber, who is an active duty airman. He's on his 9th day hunger strike, and has been standing outside the White House and outside Congress. And if you could just say something. about what it's been like?
I feel like I've had a very, very positive response and a positive impact, not only on the public, but within the military community. And that was one of my biggest goals. So.
Thank you, Larry. And your example is really so impactful. And I also want to acknowledge so many people in this room who've been going into halls of Congress with us. That is not an easy thing to do. So please, could you stand for a minute? You are participating in going into Congress with us. And I particularly want to acknowledge two people here, Mohammed and our wonderful Julia Norman, both students who have been going with us now every single day. And as somebody whose family is from Gaza, is pouring his heart out every single day, talking to some of the most heartless people that we have in Congress, but also made tremendous impact, as have you, Julia, and your brilliance. This university should be really proud of you because you are so brilliant. And I want to invite those of you who haven't joined us, we are in the Rayburn Cafeteria at 10 a.m. every day. Come and join us.
From the 9th through the 16th, thousands of activists are descending on Congress to lobby with the Quakers, the Catholics, the Franciscans. Yeah.
So there will be many hundreds. Okay, we hope thousands of people descending on Congress coming in the next 2 weeks. So very important to be there. So then I was asked about challenges, and the challenge is that our system is broken. Congress does not work. The White House does not represent us. The people that are supposed to represent us do not represent our entire this is broken. And so recognize when we go into Congress, it's not because we have respect for the institution. We have tremendous disgust for that institution, really. And we say it should be the people's house, but it's not the people's house. And that's why we have to keep going in there. And just one example, opinion polls for months have said that 66% of the American people wanted a ceasefire, 80% of Democrats. At the time the poll came out, there were only 18 members of Congress that were calling for a ceasefire. They do not represent us. So many of them represent the weapons industry and the pro-Israel lobby, including AIPAC. And it has totally distorted our system. And it gives us policies that every year, even before October 7th, we were sending $3.8 billion of our money to Israel to kill people in Gaza, to keep this apartheid system going in the West Bank. It is broken. And so what we are doing is trying little by to our system. It will be a long struggle, maybe my lifetime, but luckily there are young people who have taken this up. And when I see the change that happened way too slowly, like I never in my life, I thought it would be a cold day in hell when Nancy Pelosi would sign a letter saying that we shouldn't send weapons to Israel. I mean, I come from San Francisco. We've been camping out outside her home. We've been lying down in front of her car. We have been doing whatever we can to get Nancy Pelosi. And she is so AIPAC, and she is probably the most prominent Democrat in the House. She's the biggest fundraiser for the Democrats. She is such a friend of Biden. Biden sign a letter saying no weapons to Israel is just a sea change. It's absolutely remarkable. And to see more mainstream Democrats in the Senate, like Senator Van Hollen, thanks to pressure from his constituencies, constant pressure, he is now saying no weapons to Israel. Now, they're qualifying and all kinds of things, but this is progress. This is amazing progress. And it is thanks to the wellspring of grassroots opposition that these people can't go anywhere, to a town hall, to a dinner, to a fundraiser, without being confronted by people who say, stop supporting the genocide. So I just want to end by saying this grassroots movement is astounding. I know a lot in this room, whether it's in the halls of Congress or the encampment that Hazami is going to talk about that is just unbelievable, or the other kinds of protests all have been involved in. It is making a difference. It is changing the narrative. And in the years to come, there will not be this kind of, quote, rock solid support for Israel. There will be rock solid support for Palestine, free Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you, Medea. Thank you for the personal example and also for the inspiring signs of change that you and progress that you named, as well as recognizing many people here who also partners and comrades in the struggle with us all. We're going to go from the Congress to London. We're going to go to Louise Regan, is the chair of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. She's also a union activist and the National Education Union's International Committee. She had led many delegations of trade union members to Palestine, and I had the honor actually participating in the last 500,000 protests in London that I know the solidarity movement had a major role to. Thank you again being late on the UK timing, and we look forward to hear from you. The floor is yours, Louise.
No problem. Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's been very inspiring to hear from the other speakers. I want to start by sending solidarity to the students at the university for their, whatever you call it, suspension or probation that they have been put under. We stand in absolute solidarity with students who are speaking out. Very strong student movement here in the UK. So please pass on our best wishes to them.
Thank you.
So I've been asked to talk about what we have been doing here in the UK, obviously. Palestine Solidarity Campaign is the largest organisation in the UK campaigning Palestinian rights and freedoms, and was established over 20 years ago. And over that 20-year period, we've continued to work and campaign for justice for the Palestinian people. But obviously, post the current assault on Gaza, we have had to really step up our actions and think about what we can do in a really coordinated way to really build solidarity. And so we have been leading regular national protests. So those have run fortnightly and then every 3 weekly. They have been huge protests, actually. At their largest point, we had close to 1 million people on the streets of London. Very vibrant, very mixed protests with lots of young, old, children, people of all faiths, people, black and white, all together campaigning for justice for Palestinians. They have been labelled by who was our, at that point, Home Secretary as hate marches. It's very clear right from the very beginning, these were marches for peace and for justice. And we have continued those regular national demonstrations. And as I say, we've had a really positive response to those. Most recent one had over around 250,000 people on the streets of London. But in between that, we have been doing quite a lot of different work in our different areas up and down the country, different cities and towns, building solidarity. So again, that has been either people doing street demonstrations, so marches, rallies. Sometimes people are doing different sort of protests in sort of a static way, but just basically trying to keep momentum and keep raising awareness about what is happening in Palestine currently. And you know, I could spend a long time talking about the atrocities we're seeing, but I'm sure people in the room are aware of the horrific statistics that we are seeing. And I must say a huge thank you to Zeina Azzam for her poem. That was a poem that was read on one of my local protests by a very young child, read her poem out, and it was extremely powerful. And so we do thank her for that poem. It is used very widely over here in the UK by our movement to sort of make people really visualize what the situation is on the ground. And I think that is some of what we have been trying to do. So as well as doing these very large, strong and peaceful national and local marches and rallies, we do have quite a lot of work at the moment around our boycott, divestment and sanctions work. So we work with the Boycott National Committee. We're very closely working with them on key targets. So we did a huge amount of work in the UK around Puma. And for people there who, you know, obviously Puma have now said that they are no longer going to renew their funding of the Israel Football Association. So we're really pleased that that has been a successful target. We have now moved on to Barclays Bank, which was their next target that they asked us to work on. So we have regular street stalls and demonstrations outside Barclays Banks in the UK. Currently, we've had 2,500 people close bank accounts directly because of our campaign. They've written to the bank directly to confirm that they're closing the account because of their complicity with the arms trade or with links to companies that are arming Israel and their complicity in that action. We've got a new national closure day coming up on the 9th of May. And again, we'll be encouraging more people to take part in that action and to close their accounts. We think that whole working on boycott, divestment and sanctions is a really key target for us. We also do a lot of work with our trade union partners. So obviously I'm in the National Education Union. It's a very large education union here in the UK, which has a very long and proud history of supporting the Palestinian people. But we have just had our annual Congress. We've just passed another motion in support of the Palestinian people. We've been at the forefront of calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, for sanctions, for ending of arms to Israel, and obviously for the immediate release of the hostages. And we have condemned the actions of Hamas on the 7th. So, you know, just to be clear, we have been very clear about all of those. We work very closely with our student movement here, which is a broad movement. I mean, you did ask us to talk about challenges. So we have quite a hostile government. So as I referred to our previous Home Secretary calling us hate marches, there's been sort of several attempts to close down and stop us marching and demonstrating in the UK, but we have sort of pushed back against that and have held firm on that. We also have something called the anti-BDS bill, which is currently in progress through our parliament, which is an attempt to shut down our ability to take boycott, divestment and sanctions action. And we have a very broad coalition of civil society organisations who are campaigning against that, in terms of saying that is something that should not happen, which is against our civil liberties, and we will keep campaigning and pushing back against that, and calling on, if that does come in, we will be calling on future governments to repeal that, because we do not feel that that is an acceptable thing for us to do. We've also just set up an e-alert, so an e-action, calling on people to sign up to call on the government to stop arming Israel. Currently, I think we have had over 50,000 signatures to that. That's something that we are pushing very hard, because we feel that the arming of Israel is a significant issue. I mean, in terms of the impact of our actions, I think we have evidence from sort of surveys shows that around 70% of the population, around 3/4 of the population in the UK support an immediate and permanent ceasefire. And I think some of that is around the awareness raising that we have done. There is increasing pressure on our government to stop the arms, to stop arming Israel, and we think that again is around awareness raising that we have done, and we think that that is a really vital thing that we can be doing. And I suppose the final thing is, you asked us what our message would be. And my message is this, because, wherever we are in the world, it can at times seem that you don't have a voice and that you're silenced. And I think our job as activists, as campaigners, as socialists, as pacifists, as people that want peace, our job is to keep speaking out, is to not be silenced, to use our voices, to speak the truth and tell people in our own countries, but also globally, what is happening, and fight for justice and freedom for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Thank you. Your words resonate very, very nicely here. And I think they're similar, especially with the challenges regarding hostile government and the anti-BD campaign. We all face these challenges as well. And thank you for the examples that you also share with us. Hazami is ready? Excellent. So we'll go to Hazami. Hazami, if you don't know her, she's of Palestinian heritage and is a public affair and social impact strategist, social innovator, and the humanitarian also. She's executive producer and host of the Finding Humanity. Hazami is the founder and chairperson of the Humanity Lab Foundation and the Global People Summit. Since October 7 has led creative protests in Washington, D.C., including the kibbutz occupation at the Israeli embassy and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken house. We're very happy to listen to your thoughts as well. Thank you.
All right, y'all. I apologize in advance for being exhausted. Being up all the time is exhausting. All right, I'm going to talk. I had a few questions that I was given to try to answer, and I'm going to try to answer some of them through this presentation, and hopefully leave you guys with some. For those of you that are trying to navigate activism or trying to figure out how to best leverage your talents to be part of the movement, hopefully give you some tidbits to think about. So first and foremost, uncertainty. We live in a world where people that you need to know everything. If anyone tells you that they know the direction of advocacy and activism, they're lying. The beautiful thing about change and change happen is that we don't know how far and where the ripples will go. And you just have to have faith that change is going to happen in the positive and right direction, and you have to work to try to create it. But if you're trying to create an outcome, then your focus becomes on that outcome rather than centering the cause, adaptable and malleable. And then you have to learn how to navigate challenges. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. We don't know where change can lead, but we know we've got to be doing it, right? And so Uncertainty is not something that is taught, and it should be, because with embracing uncertainty, take risks. You can be okay making mistakes and saying, whoops, that didn't work, let me go here. Whereas if you have a strategic plan, right? Everyone here that's in school, they're teaching you, right? You got to figure it out, right? You have to have a plan. No one wants to hire you to ask questions. I made a career asking questions at the highest level of a lot of entities that I will not get into in the past. But a lot of time, problem with creating change is that we get this formula that just does not work. And we need to do things differently. So the facts, we are living in a time where everything is political. Like everything is political. I can give you any social and find you people that will tell you that that is wrong of some sorts. The issue of Palestine is obviously increasingly political. Censorship is a really big problem. Suppression, targeting of activists. My social media accounts are constantly suspended. It doesn't even say that they're suspended. You just simply can't open them. They just spin. And then when you go and you say, I want to file an appeal, they're like, well, there's nothing to appeal because your accounts aren't impacted. Really? It just keeps spinning. It doesn't open. They don't load. I'm even robbed of the appeal process. And so, that is the type of suppression that we're dealing with. It's unknown suppression also. So how many of you guys know of the 3% rule of activism or revolution? So it doesn't take a whole lot, but there's a theory that came out of studying a lot of resistance movements over a long time. And in essence, if you get 3.5% of a population to change behavior, something really important here is people don't realize that changing perspectives does not lead to changing behavior, right? I can empathize with you, but I'm still going to not boycott. Are we going to create change? No, you just have a bunch who have great thoughts that don't take action. Doesn't create change. And so creating action is hard because you're asking people to change behavior, to do things differently. And most people, even empathetic people, don't want to do it, including a lot of pro-Palestine, pro-humanity people, right? They're like, oh, this is so convenient to thing from Tate. It's right there, right? And it's like, no. So if we were to start looking at the 3.5% rule when it comes to shifting the tides on Palestine, it would mean that you'd have to get, not a lot of numbers actually, 12 million people to vote, speak up, do, act, change, boycott, a lot of things, donate, and then you start to create change. We're still not really close to getting that level of commitment, but hopefully the advocacy that you heard about is hopefully going to get us there. Also, nonviolence resistance movements. There's something really important here. I know that a lot of conversations, even within the activism spaces, are talking about the influence of nonviolent resistance. If you look historically, nonviolent resistance movements is not saying that you're not disrupting, right? There's this idea that we're just sitting here like, so kumbaya, Miller. Bro, I am not kumbayaing out in the face of Zionists every single day. There's no kumbaya in anything I do, but I'm not willing to. And it's just ethos. It's just not who I am. And I think you can achieve a lot more. But I think there's still this tension, even within activist spaces, of this idea that civil disobedience means you have to do certain things or take certain actions that are somehow just. The other of this is most of the people that will critique you are not willing to do it themselves. They're great at commenting on why you should do things radically, but very few people are willing to do it themselves. So violent resistance is historically a very important way of disrupting businesses. Again, we hear a lot of these things. I really wish more people would do more disrupting business as usual, because I can tell you, and probably Medea and others, if you on the streets in Washington, there's a lot of business as usual. There's a lot of business as usual. We're on Embassy Row and in front of Blinken's house every day. Up until we started popping up there a lot, people didn't even know who lives there. People come by, roll down their windows. Who lives here? Secretary of State Blinken. Who is that? I actually have a lot of videotape of people asking, who is that? And much as we think people know, if I was to ask you guys right now, if you're not interested, who is the Secretary of Commerce? Oh, how many people knew that? Who's the Secretary of, I don't know. What other things are you? Transportation, right? Unless issues impact you, like if you're interested in foreign affairs, don't say it. Okay, I'm watching you. Unless you are invested into causes, like we really expect everyone to know who the Secretary of State is. Unless you're really interested in foreign affairs or care about international policy, most people don't know people because they don't impact their daily lives. And so again, a lot of education still needs to happen. But direct action is a great way to do that because people often stop by what we're doing and they're like, I have no idea what is this, but why are you here? Well, this is the Israeli embassy. Oh, what flag is that? At the Palestinian flag. I kid you not. We have to tell people what flag it is all the time, even though it says Palestine on all of our things. And we all wear shirts that say Palestine. But it's activism, education go hand in hand. Activism is power. There's a lot of power in activism, but the thing that I have highlighted here is it's about persuading change opinions, right? So many times with activism is just like throwing information and shame enough and you shall change. No, I sound like a preacher. It's not how it works. It's really about getting people to influence their perspectives and to change, whether we want them to vote differently, to act differently, to buy differently. And there's like a push-pull between like shaming you and then also like, please do it this way. And they kind of go hand in hand. And that's a little bit of what I'm going to get into. I'm going to skip over this because I don't want to go over time. I don't want you to get me in trouble. Okay, I'm going to skip over, skip. Okay, skipping. So die-ins. Die-ins are kind of where we started, where I started with this. One day I woke up, was holding my son, rocking him to bed, and saw a video of a Palestinian mother who was rocking her baby in a body bag and whispering in their ear. I don't know the gender of their child, but I was holding my son very similar, and I always do kind of affirmations. It's my thing with him when he's going to sleep, and he's 16 months old. And I just couldn't unthink what would I do if I was holding my child for the last time. And she had such a stoic face that was just, I just can't explain it. And that made me realize that I needed to do something personally that was a little more provocative than I'd done before. And I will say this publicly, and I do say this publicly. I was worried about my career. I didn't do a lot. I, did the thing, went to Harvard, worked at the whatever, went to the UN, did some consulting department here and there, did all these things that you were supposed to do to get to the place where it was finally okay to be your full self. That place never comes. That time never comes, because the more you get influence, the more you gain access, the more you become part of the system, the harder it actually becomes to speak out. And I learned that the hard way at 40 years of life. My birthday was actually 2 weeks ago, so or 40, but still. So die-ins, looking at history, die-ins became a really important action in the protests, and it was literally just a bunch of people laying around on the ground. And so when your average person walks by, they're like, "Oh, there's a body. What is this? Tell me more." And that's what we started doing. Up until now, I started as a party of one, and I convinced a friend of mine, Tamara, to join me. And then we have now grown to 900 people that all kind of found us on social media. We've been doing activations now for 174 days all around Washington. And collectively, we've done over 880,000 hours of engagement. And, we just go all around town and just plop our bodies down, literally, for hours and hours, handing out educational material and information. So these are just some examples. That is our walk of Congress, where we walked around handing out dolls. Actually, Medea was with us that day, handing out dolls, what we called bloody APAC money, and just been doing all types of die-ins all over town. I'll tell you, concrete gets hard on your body after a while. And then, I don't know, I'm just kidding. Anyway, that you did not see that. Okay, that did not happen. But yeah, so we developed this blood formula thing that's just food coloring and water. It's hilarious because the internet, there's actually Reddit channels where people try to figure out what it is. They're like, this is toxic. And I'm like, I actually like to prove to the cops toxic. I used to actually drink it. I'm like, look, it tastes this good still. It's tomato flavored. It's gross. And then we started visuals, but the blood dumps actually became the same. Everyone wanted blood dump. And it was just, we would be standing there just dumping blood in front of the feet of the White House staff as they come and go. And we tell them, you're spilling Gaza's blood, you're walking through Gaza. And then you could literally see the foot tracks. And people would try to tell us that we were doing naughty things. And obviously we're not. The one thing I get good at in studying the law, this was at the Mayor Bowser's 5K, where people reached the finish line and just plopped their bodies down. And then the police ended up making everyone die in one corner. So that's what's in the corner. doing things like a recreation. These are all stills from a video, but we have all these videos online. The recreation of the Nativity Act, where we had a person who was dressed as a IDF or IOF soldier walking around and killing people one by one, eventually killing baby Jesus. APAC money, again, in front of APAC, where we did the blood dumps, in front of manufacturers, where we've done them. And this is the kibbutz that is like what we're doing now more full-time. Kibbutz Blinken is a settlement that we set up 24/7. And I say, since Americans think settlements are cool, let's bring them to Washington. Right? All these people are voting for them. They're okay with it. They're normalizing it. So why don't we pop one up in front of everyone's house? So if y'all want to set up settlements, let me know. Right now, we only have 2. They're a lot to sustain, but boy, is it when you read press and it's like, Blinken is complaining to President Biden that there is a palace settlement in front of his. And then the conversations that we imagine, because we also have a 24-hour settlement in front of the Israeli embassy, where we have a full siege of the embassy. The conversations, as you guys know, DHS and diplomatic service is under State Department, right? It's foreign affairs. So the conversation that we imagine taking place is that this ambassador that because we do stuff at his home and we do stuff at the embassy, and he's calling Blinken and he's like, yo, this is just, it's unbearable. And Blinken's like, really, dude? Tell me about it. Because we've been at his house as long. And so anchor all of our work in education. And this is actually an important point. We're not just out there being bullied and harassed and all the stuff that happens, but we've given as a community 3 educational flyers out around town. And these are important because again, I think that people know these statistics, people know this information, people know what a genocide is. They don't. A lot of people don't. Am I out of time? Okay. Okay, sorry. Have fun. So we give out material. These are the flyers that we gave out during Christmas at all the different Christmas locations. We went in front of Biden's church. We were in front of major institutions around town. And again, like giving action, like here's we want to, and here's ways you can do it. The Santa Naughty list, we gave those all around the malls. We got chased out of malls, but it's great when you take off your keffiyehs, no one knows you anymore. And so, you know, asking people like, don't be on the naughty list, you can take action, like matter, individual matter. So challenges that we faced is that a lot of people that join us included, knowing your rights. Right, there's a lot of things that we are learning, and the one thing I am so proud of in being in front of these embassies and doing these 24/7 settlements is even the lawyers told us we couldn't do it. And I'm like, let me tell you, let me show you the law, come here. So there's a lot of gray space in the law also, and it's really about knowing how to advocate, knowing how to read, knowing how to dissect, knowing how to balance federal with state, with local laws of different jurisdictions. Blinken's home is on property line between Fairfax County and Arlington. It's excellent because Fairfax County has different rules. Yes, thanks for not being the one house over. People don't feel like they know enough. We have so many people joining us. I would do more, but I just don't know. Well, if anyone tells you they know everything about everything, they're also lying. Because the more you know you don't know. And the thing about, there's so many Palestinian scholars, Palestinian activists, journalists, and everything that have been doing stuff for so long. We don't need all guys to become overnight experts. We don't want that, trust me. We want us to amplify the voices that have been doing this type of research and work for, you know, a long, long time, for decades. And so you don't need to know in a cause. And that's where the flyers come in. The flyers have links to information of entities that are respectable, researched, credible, videos, professors, scholars. Again, you don't need to be an expert. We don't get into the debate. Actually, one of the things I do want to address, we don't feed trolls. We don't feed the trolls. And that's really important because a lot of times people feel like it's like it has to turn into a street debate. No debate needed. We're here for humanity. If you don't believe in that, cool, goodbye. Walk away and figure out how to, you know, activate more. Fear of impacts on your career. Because if all of us are afraid, then it's not going to change. Think about if every single person says, I'm not afraid anymore. It's going to change, right? But so we just need more people to build courage there. Fear of physical and emotional violence. The reality is I can't tell y'all what to do here. We are navigating this. People are vile. Zionists are vile. Have been called terrorists, have water thrown on, a lot of stuff. Good news is a lot of people get arrested. Bad news is their friends get pissed and come back and yell at us for their friend getting arrested for abusing us to begin with. It's fascinating. Change feels impossible to achieve. right? A lot of people are just frustrated because we're doing all this work and nothing is changing. It's getting worse. And people in Gaza, the situation is getting more dire and more frustrating. But that's the beauty of change management, is that change does happen. You can't see it. I think of this boat moving in a distance. It feels like it's not moving. And then you look away, you play on the beach and you look, oh, it's gone. You're like, whoa, where did it go? But if you're staring at it, it moves really slow. And people want to coerce your activism. People want to tell you, do it this way. No, do it away. No, Habibi, go do it yourself. Why are you trying to tell me how to do what you want to do in your head? Go do it yourself. We need more people to do more things. So instead of spending the time the capacity that you have to try to critique, if it is not something that is a loving kind of directive, and if you've given a directive a few times, don't try to police people's work. Figure out how to do it. Palestine needs all of us, everywhere. So do your thing. Okay, I got the hint. Okay, khalas. I will stop.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Thank you, guys. I am really sorry. Each one of you needs one for yourself, one session. Either way, that's good. Great. Thank you. But we do have two people in South Africa and UK, and also to be able to go to bed. When I listen to Ilana, Dodelson, who is a Jewish anti-Zionist organizer based in Philadelphia. She has worked with many different groups and coalitions in Philadelphia, and is also currently focusing on strategy or starting an anti-Zionist group of religious Jews called Red Shuva, I think. Yeshiva.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored to be here in this company. I wish I could be here in person and not virtually, but I feel very honored and inspired nonetheless. I want to say off the bat that I'm not here representing any particular group, and that my opinions are not representative of any of the groups I've organized with. I've been involved in planning and organizing of nonviolent actions through If Not Now, Jewish Voice for Peace, Prayers for Peace, and coalitional work in Philly. I'm currently working on starting a new group called the Red Yeshiva, which will hopefully address some of the gaps that I felt in the Jewish left, which is a little bit what I'll be talking about, and also just kind of the question, what does it mean to be in solidarity? One of the main functions of the recent Jewish-led actions has been to visibilize Jewish dissent to the current genocide in Gaza and to the century-long occupation, colonization, and apartheid that preceded it. Some of this organizing has looked like highly escalated spectacle-like actions, like blocking access to the White House, blocking bridges, sit-ins at train stations, and more. This form of highly disruptive and visually powerful actions has done a really good job at visibilizing Jewish resistance, which is really important on its own. It interrupts the narrative that any opposition to Israel is anti-Semitic and that Judaism and Zionism are one and the same. And it makes the argument of the US government weaker, that by supporting Israel, they're supporting Jews. It weakens the efforts of those in power to tie the current genocide to Jewish safety. So the spectacle and high publicity is, I think, the most successful part of the Jewish actions in the past 6 months. There's a lot of different reasons for Jews, particularly, to get involved in this struggle. And I think the strategies that they choose really reflect those reasons. We hear and say a lot that our liberations are bound up in one another's, and that no one is free until we are all free. And this is, I think, at the heart of solidarity, but what does it actually mean? I think this is the central question of solidarity. The way that people understand their own liberation is going to impact how they show up and the actions they plan. See a lot of people showing up out of a feeling of responsibility. For Jews, this genocide is being done in our name. This leads people to show up at protests, follow the lead of Palestinian partners, supporting their events and actions and centering their struggles, which is a good thing. We should be following the lead of Palestinians and centering their voices at this moment. But it doesn't answer the question, how are our liberations bound up with each other? And what do people mean when they say liberation? I see others showing up and organizing out of an understanding that the current genocide and all the conditions that led to it will not make anyone safer. And they're right. These people are fighting for shared safety. They want justice and equality in Israel-Palestine. They want to get there through peaceful diplomatic means. This leads to electorally focused actions, pushing our electives to pass more progressive laws, to support an immediate ceasefire, to reject AIPAC. And a lot of these have done really amazing things. We've seen a lot of successes and huge amounts of impact. More and more politicians are calling for ceasefire and conditional aid. A lot of these actions focus on Palestinian and Israeli fears of safety equally. And one thing that I worry about in this form of Jewish solidarity is that defining Jewish liberation as Jewish safety, in defining it that way, a crucial piece is being missed, and that Zionist narratives of Judaism remain unchallenged. This is one reason why, like the speaker before me, I agree, political education is absolutely necessary. Without challenging these narratives, are we truly supporting the struggle for real, fundamental, and a truly change and a truly free Palestine? Or are we settling for incremental change to the status quo rather than the fundamental change we know is needed? Zionist narratives put forward by Israel and the US position Jews as the great moral victims of history who must be protected. This is also the narrative that we're taught of ourselves as Jews. And it's the narrative that leads to the centering of Jewish fear on the right as well as on the left. This narrative is not true. And it's certainly not true in America or Israel. Shaul Magid puts it really well in his new book. He writes, "The social disapproval and legal consequences for anti-Semitic acts in America today constitute what I'm calling the non-oppressed status of American Jews. This is not to say that American Jews do not feel vulnerable to anti-Semitic violence. In many cases, they do, and for good reason. But vulnerability to independent bad actors is not the same as societal or state-sanctioned oppression." So many Jews really are afraid, and they do feel their safety to be at risk, and sometimes and increasingly for good reason. But on the left, basing our actions and demands on this feeling, which is not based in material systemic reality, is missing a key point. There's a difference between feeling vulnerable and being unsafe, and there's a difference between safety and liberation. My real question in this case isn't how can I guarantee absolute safety for myself and my people, but instead, why do I feel unsafe? Who is manufacturing that feeling and who is benefiting from it? Zionism and Israel benefit from Jews feeling unsafe because it supports the narrative that the state of Israel is necessary to protect Jews. And the US also benefits from it as it provides cover for their continued economic and military interests in the region. Amilcar Cabral, the anti-colonial Pan-Africanist leader, wrote that the foundation for national liberation rests in the inalienable right of every people to have their own history. I come to this work from a place of solidarity and in fighting for my own liberation. For me, liberation doesn't mean only safety. I want liberation from Zionism, and I want to have my own history. I'm very lucky to have grown up in a community where I got to live Jewishly. I am from and remain in modern Orthodox and Frum community. Being Jewish is a fabric of my daily life. Growing up, everyone I knew was Jewish, and we engaged in collective religious and communal practices that have been developed and passed on in diaspora for 2,000 years. I cherish my Jewish community and practices. They're central to who I am and how I move through the world. I can't imagine myself without them. As I grew up, I began to notice the ways that Zionism has embedded itself in Jewish life and identity, and I'm watching it gain momentum. Zionism was founded on the negation of diaspora, an ideology which rejects diasporic culture, language, and ways of life in favor of a modern national identity. Zionist historiography determines the histories we're taught and not taught about ourselves, the songs we sing, the languages we speak, the rituals we practice. It determines how we relate to other people, to each other, and to ourselves. In many Jewish spaces, support for Israel, a modern nation state, is central to how people practice their Judaism. My anti-Zionism has meant that I've been cut off by many people and communities that I used to call home. I don't want to know what being Jewish will mean in 10, 20, or 30 years, and I don't know how I will exist in that world. So I'm fighting from Jewish liberation from the ongoing harms of Zionism and imperialism, which has rewritten and depraved and erased my culture. And I know culture to be at its core determined by material conditions. So for fighting for the continued vitality of my own culture and way of life, I'm fighting against the material conditions of imperialism, capitalism, and Zionism. that led to mass assimilation and adoption of fascist politics in Jewish communities. This is what I mean when I say that my struggle is bound up in Palestinian liberation. The same forces that have led to the current genocide, Zionism and imperialism, are the very same that have threatened and are threatening to irrevocably change what it means to be Jewish. And I don't want safety if it comes at the expense of my culture, way of life, my history, a future I can believe in, and ability to be myself. When it comes to planning actions, when we come to planning actions and engaging in struggle with a clear understanding of who we are and what we're fighting for and what we're fighting against, our actions will be truly oriented towards collective liberation. This understanding, if it's rooted in history, can allow us to communicate and build trust with each other, to work together in real collective struggles with shared interests. For Jews involved in the struggle, I think it's important to follow the lead of Palestinians to center their narratives and struggles and culture in action. But in order to do that from a place of real solidarity, not just guilt or responsibility, it's crucial that we start from a place of political education, of reclaiming our own histories and of knowing what we're fighting for. The message that I think is most important to share is that in all struggles, political education is a necessary starting point. When we say no one is free until we are all free, it isn't just an abstract idea, it's material. And when we're involved in a struggle from a place of solidarity, everyone should interrogate, what am I fighting for? How do I understand my own liberation? How is it impacted by the history and daily reality of imperialism, colonialism, capitalism, racism, in this case, Zionism? And learning about these systems and our places within them and the histories of our people are the first stepping point to being able to be in real solidarity with other people. And everyone deserves a right to their own history, to their own cultures without persecution, violence, or displacement, or forced assimilation into imperialist agendas. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilana. You will feel better. Some not feeling well this morning, but thank you for your reflections, for your collective liberation and finding the intersectionality with the Palestinian struggle for liberation as well. I think you gave an excellent way to frame the notion of liberation and also political resistance in a nonviolent action as well. Thank you. Great. You guys heard from 5 different speakers, amazing stories, examples, and we have about 15, 20 minutes to close this, but we want to take some questions, reflections, any announcement for some creative violent action also will be more welcome. Medea, would you like to come here? Hazami, can you please join me here so I'm not alone? Alone too long here. All right, so the floor is yours, and also we have 3 other speakers, Dhaka, London, as well as Philadelphia. Just please walk to the mic and you can speak or point. No question, no more? Comments, questions, remarks?
Come on, somebody.
Yes, please.
I can't hear you.
I can give
There
it.
are 2 microphones on the sides. You can just walk to the microphone.
I bring it.
If what would, and this is for everybody, how would you tell somebody that it's worth risking it all? Like, how would you convince them? If that makes sense.
I don't think you can. I think it has to come from within because you have to live with the consequences of your actions. I had a definitive moment where something in me broke. I'm also don't get paid to do this. I'm not an activist for a profession. I don't work for an NGO that does activism. And so I think it's important to differentiate. There are groups that are very active in DC. There are like nonprofits, the train activists that do stuff that are under nonprofit umbrellas or advocacy umbrellas that have jail support and things like that. Our group is predominantly just a bunch of random people that do not want to be associated with organizations. And so I think, you have to decide what works for you. You also have to decide what consequences you're willing with. And honestly, some of it is about figuring out your privilege. Like, I must say that this is really important to say, I have financial means through my spouse to be able to not work for 6 months. If you're a single parent, that's not you. Like, there are reasons that make activism inaccessible to certain people depending on the time. And so there's just a lot of, I think, internal dialogue and risk that you have to assess for yourself. And then it has to feel right. And once that aligns, like, man, you can unleash so much power within yourself.
I would say that we inspire each other. And it can be a tiny thing. I mean, we just did a video the other about the keffiyeh, and Taz explained what it was about. And I said on mine that as a Jewish person, I was first reluctant to wear one. I thought maybe it wasn't kosher, and I thought it was like cultural appropriation. But then when I saw that Palestinians giving me keffiyehs and wear them, and now I've got all these people who wrote to me and said, Jewish, now I understand I can wear a keffiyeh. So it's a tiny thing like that to, I'm going on a flotilla to Gaza. We don't know what's going to happen on that. Might we get shot by this? Who knows? But, going out of your comfort zone by seeing other people do things and being inspired by them is what really moves us from one level to another. And I think when you see a genocide going on, you have to go out of your comfort zone.
Let's go to South Africa. Any comment on that question? And then also maybe Louise.
My experience is that once an idea, has taken hold of somebody's mind, particularly when pertaining to injustice, to violence, but also the lofty goals that we can live in a society which is based on equality, and common prosperity and justice. There is just no limit to how much people are prepared to make sacrifices. My experience is that, ability and willingness to sacrifice always corresponds with development in consciousness, which is not static. The more you are aware of the injustices, your responsibility, and your power to change that, it just inspires, more capacity to sacrifice and to make what is necessary, or to do what is necessary to bring about that. And I think that's the reason for me, just in conclusion, that we've got to be able to see, how do we harness the power ordinary people has? And I think that has got to be a discussion we have as we build this movement, solidarity. The enormous capacity and ordinary people have to drive the change and liberation of the people of Palestine, and indeed the whole of humanity, from the system of global capitalism and imperialism and all these operations and violence.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Louise?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question, isn't it? I mean, I don't feel that I'm risking anything. I think the people that are risking everything are the Palestinians, and that's what motivates me to do what I do, and what motivates, I think, activists here in the UK. And when we go on our delegations, what they constantly say to us when we visit our Palestinian friends is that they don't need our tears, they need our voices, because their voices are always silenced, and that we have to come back and speak out. But very recently, a Palestinian in the UK said to me, well, actually, Louise, we do need your voices, but we need your actions too. We need you to do things. And so for me, I don't feel like I'm risking anything. I feel like I'm doing something of utmost importance, because the Palestinians are losing so much.
Thank you. Do you have any reflection on this? Ilana?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to echo what was said, I think first of all, being around other people, like, we don't struggle or make change as individuals, we do it with other people. And so being together in collective struggle is the only way that it happens. And that means that you're not risking things alone, you're risking things collectively. And also, again, just to echo what was said before, I think understanding like the depths of these systems and how our struggles are connected, when it's harder to get someone to risk it all for someone else, but when you understand the ways that really our struggles are linked, I think it's a lot easier because it feels like an existential need. And so I think, yeah, developing consciousness around that and continuing to try to understand what we're fighting against leads to more and more commitment to struggling against it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Tabby. I'm a second-year PhD student here at AU. And I just wanted to start by thanking the panelists for being with us today. It's been a very odd time at AU because we haven't seen any such gatherings as this one today on this campus.
Wow.
The only events I've seen on this campus, other than the ones organized by SJP through their own leadership and other students on campus, and unapologetically pro-Israel and what they're doing. And it's a shame and it's horrible. And I'm so thankful to you, Professor Abu-Nimer, and all who organized this event for making it possible. I wanted to make an announcement and then link the question to the announcement. And then the announcement is Monday, a day from today, there's going to be a strike for Palestine. I first heard about it as a cross DC University strike where students led by centers, JVP and SJP groups of the city will be striking, not doing class walkouts, just not going to class at all, and calling on faculty and everyone to strike together. And those in DC actually going to Howard University for a training on how to continue into the summer months, continue organizing, continue working to get on and off campuses. And I came to know today that this is actually part of a larger global shut it down for Palestine action. And so I wanted to ask, I know the speaker from South Africa talked quite a bit about strikes and the importance of the labor movement. I wonder if the other panelists have any comments on this particular strategy and how it feeds into some of the other strategies that are being used. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. So we'll go to Mametlwe, South Africa. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the power listen and understand power. They have the money, they have the media, they have colossal economic resources, but we also have power. And that power for us consists in our organization, in our capacity to struggle. Without us, the working class, no, wheels move, no, phone rings, just we have the capacity to stop every supply chain that actually fuel their war machines, moves their industry, and all of that. Because imperialism, ultimately, as with every, form of capitalism, is about exploitation, is about extraction of surplus, is about profits. And the issue is, how then do we mobilize against that? And part of the strategy that we need to be able to say is that, how do we begin to identify, to actively orientate, to actively mobilize workers in those sectors of the economy, which in our countries are dominated by the Zionist interest, particularly those that are more complicit are linked with the state of Israel, are complicit in a genocide, complicit in the occupation. How then do we begin to link with workers in the logistics companies, either in the transports, in the ports, and in those industries where we can be able to hit Zionism, but also the Western imperialist interests that actually enable the genocide and so on. That is going to be absolutely important. And rooting that strategy and linking it with the day-to-day struggles of the workers. And I like what Ilana said, right? Because the very powerful base on which you can be able to build this movement is to make workers understand that it's not just solidarity with people, thousands of miles away, in the case of us here in South Africa, but actually that this is a continuation of the same struggle against the same corporate, exploitative, and oppressive imperialist interests that they are fighting. And this is what we have done in Clover, and this is what we need to do in every industry so that we are encouraging active, direct linkages with the Palestinian struggle is a two-way, solidarity, but also that they are able to see their own liberation in the liberations of the Palestinians, because ultimately, what and the basis of the oppression of the Palestinian people is imperialism that exploits and that oppresses us in different, but essentially the same way everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. If you allow me just to take a few questions, and I'll give each of you to make some comments as a closing in response to this. Is that okay? Yeah. And then you can comment on the strike for Monday as well, I know. Yes, please, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Clara. I'm a junior here at American University in my undergraduate years. And first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who spoke. It was quite moving. All of you are fascinating examples of advocacy in all of your own rights. One thing that I've come across learning of advocacy movements often is has been the difficulty with regards to government action. As we've been seeing here in the United States, the restriction of one's free speech to speak on this issue has been highly, highly, held back in regard. And there's been a lot of action taken in the United States in order to combat that. My question goes to our speakers outside of the United States, and what actions have either your government taken, or what actions have you taken in discussions with your government in order to better understand both your movements, but then for them to both act with regards to policy?
Thank you. Yes, we'll take those two, and then we'll take the final round of responses.
Hi, my name is Aiza Arif, and I'm a freshman here at AU, and I just want to thank you guys for speaking. As someone mentioned, this is like our first event we did have regarding Palestinian liberation on this campus, so I'm very grateful that this did. And something that I've heard a lot about is talk about conflict resolution and building bridges between, or having dialogue between Zionists and people that do stand with Palestine. And I was wondering, do you think that this takes away from the cause of liberation, or do you, basically is centering Zionists in Palestinian, in conversations of Palestinian liberation, or do you think that this is an essential tool to, an essential tool to build bridges between the community and yeah, that's it basically.
Thank you. Very good question. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, my name's Carla Grinstead. I am a first-year grad student in the International Peace and Conflict Resolution Program. I can talk about what you just mentioned. I think a lot of us have felt very stifled and restricted on this campus. I'm a part of the Graduate Student Council in the School of International Service, and we've been going back and forth and fighting to have some kind of an impact, some kind of a voice last year. We did put out a statement. We ignored. And I think because of the limitations that we've felt, kind of a way we've gotten around that a little bit was by creating dialogue events. We have 4 upcoming dialogue events, 2 on Wednesday of this week. We're just now starting to advertise. And 1 on the 18th, 1 on the 19th. And the intention of the dialogue events is to bring people of opposing views, various different viewpoints under the same roof, and it will be facilitated with a professional facilitator. And instead of specifically talking about like this group versus that group or the quote unquote politics of it, even though I think it's far more than politics, we are forcing conversation, forcing people to hear each other, to listen to each other compassionately, to be questioned, why have our questioned and why we're feeling and saying what we're feeling. Or yeah.
Thank you.
So we're working on it, and we're hoping it'll be successful, and a lot more we'd like to do, but this is a start, and that is also kind of where I started. I'm a Jewish person, and by engaging in dialogue with people who are different from me, it changed my life and it led me to this program. So I think dialogue can be effective.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll take a final round, couple of minutes to choose the question you want to respond to. We have the fourth one. Go ahead.
So I'm an undergrad student of AU, and I just had a question about like nonviolent resistance. How do you kind of balance the push for nonviolent resistance abroad with the armed resistance in Palestine? Like, how do you kind of support nonviolent resistance here, but also grapple with and try to stand there on the
Excellent, thank you. So, Hazami, you wanted to respond, and then we'll move.
I'll start with, I think tying back also to your question around like, everyone has a role to play in this. And I guess that ties into of the comments. Figure out what you are good at. Like shift sides on Palestine, it means that we have to get much more savvy in the legal space, much more connected in the media space, much more engaged in the philanthropic and donor spaces. It means we got to figure out how to penetrate into leadership positions, into corporate infrastructure, into CSR. There's so much that needs to change. There's so much. Zionism is seeped into so many places, which is why it's so hard to dismantle. Like change the government, everything changes. Look at corporates. Look at nonprofits. Look at philanthropic work. I mean, it's mortifying. University, I mean, all of it. It's mortifying. And until you start to unpack it, it starts to feel daunting and like an unbelievable task because everyone wants us to focus on a specific form of activism. If you're passionate about academia, which is not for everyone, then tackle that. If you're great at law, tackle that. If you're in the media, tackle that. So I think this idea that there's one form of activism is something that we need to dismantle in our own spaces also. On the point of the strike, strikes only work if there's mass people striking. There's a lot of people that are engaging in BDS that are like not telling companies, they're like, oh, I'm just going to cancel my subscription. Okay, tell them why. We're not actually creating the other piece to it, which is creating power for our community where our money matters, our money speaks for us. And so think about coupling activism with like tangible either education moments or opportunities to say, I am striking, I'm not going to school for this reason. I am not showing up to work for that reason. If you just show off, I mean, there's a lot of people that just take sick days. Okay, if you work for the federal government, no one cares why you take a sick day, right? It's PTO, it's personal time off, like whatever. Unless you're stating a point and doing it as protest, then it's just a missed message. And so I think for the strikes to work also, we need many more people willing to strike. And we've had numerous attempts at it and you don't even know what's happening. Truly, you don't even know what's happening. So I think it needs to be more, you know, for the people that are doing it, amazing job. I'm looking here, waging, I'm still. Dialogue with Zionists, that's a hard one. That came from over here somewhere. You know, I get that it depends on if someone's coming to have a dialogue. We have a lot of one-sided like vitriol coming towards us. When I stand in front of the Israeli embassy, trust me, there's people here that have seen it. People come at you with insults, attacks, verbal attacks, physical attacks. I'm not gonna have a conversation with you if you're like lunging at me, telling me that I need to die and be raped. Not doing it. So I think it comes to like time and the place and the mental capacity that you're willing to give the cause and why you're there. I think so often we feel like you can spend all this emotional bandwidth on one person when there's like a wave of people. Think about the 3% of revolution, right? If I'm going to spend all my time on the fringes, we're not going to create change. Spending time on the people that can potentially be influenced are like those people that are going to be hardened on their ideology, or they're willing to truly have a conversation. Those aren't easy to find, especially in Washington.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Well, on the strike, I totally agree with you, Hazami, that you have to have masses, but I do like the way that it was just announced here. It's not just walking out, it's going to Howard University and all talking to each other about how to keep this movement going. That is a great idea. On the union thing, you know, our comrade in South Africa, you know, they have strong unions. Unfortunately, we in the country, our unions are so weak. And yet, despite that, I am amazed by the number of unions that have come out for a ceasefire. And there is a group called Labor for a Ceasefire that has gotten electrical workers, the longshoremen union, the teachers union, the air stewards union, and the United Auto Workers, which represents hundreds of thousands, and teachers representing, you know, millions. Well, the FLCIA, with a very weak statement, but still amazing, amazing. The point is, how do you turn that into, from a statement to getting your members involved in doing something? Now, on the plus side, the leaders of those movements have a lot of access to the White. They tell us they've been to the White House, they've talked to Biden, which is great. On the other hand, some of the biggest ones, like UAW, just gave their endorsement to Biden. So if you're gonna, you know, push your union to make a statement, then push the union to actually do something once that statement is made. And then the last thing I would want to say on the dialogue, I don't know if it's true, but I heard there were objections to me coming here because I've been to Iran, had a dialogue with Iranians. I believe in dialogue. I have been to Iran. I've had meetings with the Taliban in Afghanistan, meetings with all sides in Yemen. I'm not allowed to see the different sides I've met with in Israel, Palestine, unfortunately, because it's become so taboo. But I do believe in dialogue, and I believe that we also have to have dialogue. I mean, with my own family, I have a lot of Trump supporters. Family. So having dialogue with people who disagree with you is very important to do, but let's not get stuck with this constant dialogue, because really this is the time for action.
Thank you. Now, let's hear from Louise. Louise, do you have any closing comment, any response?
Just on what can we do in terms of trade unions? I mean, we have very strong support from our trade unions in the UK, and we have set up what we call Workplace Day of Action. So we have specific targeted days. I mean, our trade union laws here are probably some of the most restrictive possible, but we do Workplace Day of Actions. We call people, members, to take action, to speak out, to educate members. We've had quite a lot of student walkouts in the UK, where students on days of action have walked out, held little demonstrations. Again, I think the purpose of them are not just about doing a static action, but about educating others about what is happening and getting people to get involved. We also have a Trade Unionists for Palestine group who are blocking arms factories, trying to prevent the movement of arms around the UK. Again, a really useful thing, and a lot of our PSC are doing sort of peaceful protests outside arm factories. And then the last thing I'll say is on government engagement. I mean, our government doesn't engage with us over this issue, but we do have a growing movement called No Ceasefire, No Vote. So in the UK, we are coming up to a general election. We don't know when the government will call that. They have to call it by December at the latest. But there is a very growing movement of people campaigning around this slogan, No Ceasefire, No Vote, and saying they will not vote for politicians who do not call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. And there are increasing numbers of people who are putting themselves forward to stand in elections, who are saying that they will be calling for a ceasefire and supporting Palestinian rights. So I think we are seeing sort of a changing trend slightly in UK politics.
Thank you. Thank you. Ilana, and then we'll close from South Africa where we started.
Great. Yeah. I guess I can speak to the dialogue thing. I think there are, dialogue is great. And I think especially there are a lot of communities where a dialogue is needed and, like interpersonal relationships are really important in establishing that dialogue and trying to move people forward. I think that if it's used as a metric for which like you cannot have a Palestinian solidarity event unless it is inclusive of the opposite side, that's infuriating, right? That's like actually just a way to silence people who are fighting for Palestinian liberation. So there's a way that dialogue is really important within various communities, and then there's a way that the demand for it is like a coded way of silencing people. And I think like about the Jewish left in particular, it seems like so many of the organizations on the Jewish left and every organization that is in any way rooted in traditional Jewish practices is so fixated on dialogue and inclusivity in an effort to get more and more people like out of the grips of Zionism, that there isn't actually an example of radical Jews who are actually anti-Zionist, because none of the organizations will say that in an effort to not scare people away. And so I think, yes, there needs to be dialogue. And also, yes, there needs to be people who are actually on the left, who are actually unapologetically saying the things that they mean and coming to that point from like a clear understanding of why. And so, yes, I think dialogue is important, but it can't be the only thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Mametlwe, go ahead, close the evening for us, and then you can go.
Thank you very much. Look, I mean, just in terms of what has been the government actions here, I mean, I think everybody knows about the case before the International Court of Justice. There's also been now a threats of arrest of South Africans that are participating in the mercenary activity in the IDF. I mean, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also other government officials have openly made the threat. We have now been lodging cases against the individuals that we can identify on that and so on. We have, I think, through that, in a way, forced government to do what it hasn't really committed to do, which is effective to terminate relations, diplomatic relations with Israel. They've downgraded their embassy, but they've not formally, done that. I think so. There has been a movement, all of that. So, and I think that is a victory, as I've said, of the mobilization that has taken place, but also the way that I think that movement has forced the issue in the public discourse, in the context, of course, where for the Black working class, these things are very easy. I mean, they know apartheid when they hear and see one, right? You are not going to tell them that this is not apartheid when you are just outlining the situation and in Israel, where they will be able to hear that. They know about the hypocrisy of imperialism. All the talks about blaming the victims, the Palestinian people for trying to resist. They've heard that before. You'd know that American government there, I mean, during apartheid, they were talking about constructive engagement with the apartheid regime, whilst it was Mandela, for the matter, who they put on the list of terrorists. Today, nobody wants to admit that. So all this hypocrisy that we hear around Palestine and around Israel, the Black working class had it before, but also they know for a fact that they can't just trust these elites and so on to take matters. Of course, the movement has to also disabuse itself of the illusions on the ANC, but also I think to put pressure on the ANC to confront ANC by way of demand, to confront ANC by way of actions and the movement that can propel it further. And I think I want to close on this question that I think has been raised about the resistance. We've got to be very clear. We support the right of the masses of Palestine to resist, including by means of an armed resistance. Anybody who lived in an apartheid South Africa. To say that we can put, into question the right of the Palestinians to resist by means of arms, would not have known what system like this actually entails. Obviously, armed resistance does not necessarily entail support for what Hamas did on October 7th and so on. The indiscriminate killing of the Israeli civilians, that is unacceptable. We can never measure ourselves by the morality of, the oppressors and imperialists and all of that and so on. We represent the best future of humanity, and I think that should be demonstrated by the program that we put forward, not only in the way we carry our struggle, but also what sort of society do you propose? And of course, from the program in terms of transformation, liberation of Palestine, flow also the strategy by which we want to carry that struggle. I would have said, for instance, that if the Palestinian resistance as it currently is, really want revolution, what you need at the present moment is the strategy that bases itself on the arming the Palestinian masses themselves, so that at the present moment they can defend themselves in the case of Gaza against the genocidal campaign that is being carried there. In West Bank, you could arm communities that are facing settler violence, as well as, of course, trade union, as well as other mass organizations of the working class in defensive struggles, which in due course can actually be the basis for an armed mass insurrection to defeat, the siege in Gaza, to defeat the occupation in West, in West Bank, to basically clear the whole of Palestine of the Israeli occupation, and of course, linking with the struggle and solidarity with the struggle of all the people of the Middle East that are fighting their own dictatorships, because we would argue that the future of Palestine is not the Bandustan that will be posed in a situation of independent Palestine on, a capitalist basis, but a socialist, federation of all the Middle East based on the right of self-determination of all the people of the Middle East that are living under all forms of oppression, religious persecution, and of course, at the present moment in Palestine, a brutal settler colonialism and genocide.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing with us all your experiences, examples, and excitement. As you saw, some of our students said this first event that we have had without necessarily attaching dialogue to it. But I think there were some other also event in November, where we went to in McDowell as well. Barbara led them and organized them as well. It's wonderful to see so many kafiyas in one room in Founders Hall. Founders Hall is where we faculty and staff have our monthly meeting, and I don't think ever since this building was done we had such number of kafiya, and that's very important space and narrative to be done. Thank you for all your, again, clapping and excitement and inspiring. Solidarity is to feel sustained, to feel supported, to feel empowered by other people, even if they said information nothing new for you, but you feel the connection and you get hope and inspiration from the sacrifice and the work that people are doing around us. So thank you for everyone who came here and stayed those 2 hours with us, and inshallah again in much better circumstances. Thank you. In the freestyle, as Hazami said, thank you. And can we just have a photo and the list? تعالي زينة يلا. مايكل Muhammad. That was awesome.
That's the wrong school to ask the question.
I know.
Now it's like how many references there are in the
Anda.
Things are good. Great so far.
Before you leave, I am not very good at these things, but Mohammed Uthman is the engine behind all of this event. And thank you to Michael here from Nonviolence International. Thank you. And to Abdul. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, comrades.
How are you doing? Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Meta. Thank you, Louise. Thank you. Thank you, Ilana. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Same on my end.
Make sure that we get the recording from them.
Oh.